Some researchers looked at this data and said, "This cannot be real. A supplement made from protein outperforming testosterone on paper?" Stay with me, because what you are about to hear changes everything. Here is what nobody talks about when it comes to Most people have never even heard this name, and that is a problem. Because the data behind this compound is either brilliant or deeply suspicious, and by the end, you will know exactly which one it is. Let us start from the very beginning, so nothing gets confusing here. Stands for beta-hydroxy beta-methylbutyrate, and yes, that is a mouthful. But what it actually is surprisingly simple to understand. When your body breaks down leucine, it produces as a byproduct. Leucine is the most anabolic amino acid your body has, period. It is the one amino acid that directly triggers muscle growth signals. Every time you eat protein, leucine is doing the heavy lifting inside. Now is what leucine breaks down into, further down the chain. Think of it as the concentrated final signal, after all processing is done. And here is where it gets interesting. Gram for gram, this is wild. To get 3 grams of you would need 600 grams of protein. That is 60 grams of leucine, converting down into just 3 grams total. So what you are getting is an incredibly concentrated downstream muscle signal. This next part is the most important, so do not skip ahead here, because that concentration is exactly why researchers got excited about initially. Less volume, more direct signal, straight to the muscle tissue doing work. Now there are 2 forms you will see when shopping for this. First is calcium, also written as BCA on most product labels. Second is free acid form, and both actually work pretty well. The calcium form absorbs in around 10 to 15 minutes after taking it, but the free acid form may offer up to 97% better absorption. So if you are going to try it, free acid form makes sense. Better absorption does not always mean better results, but it is a start. Stay with me, because this changes everything, especially when we get to safety. Most people get this completely wrong. They assume new supplements are automatically dangerous. A study in Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise tested 6 grams daily. 6 grams is a hefty dose, almost double what most protocols recommend taking. Subjects were monitored for a full month. Cholesterol levels, lipids, all biomarkers checked. At the end of 30 days, nothing changed in a negative direction at all. Cholesterol was fine, lipid panels were fine, organ markers were completely undisturbed. This tells us that at reasonable doses, HMB appears to be quite safe. Now here is one thing worth knowing, and most people never mention this part. A rodent study found high doses increased fasting insulin levels rather significantly. That matters because insulin sensitivity directly affects both muscle gain and fat loss. But here is the caveat that changes the conversation completely around this point. Leucine itself is already insulinogenic, meaning it spikes insulin on its own too. Even eating a steak will cause an insulin response. That is completely normal. So unless you are taking extreme amounts, this concern stays relatively minor overall. Write this down, because now we are getting into the body composition results. A study published in the Journal of Nutrition tracked subjects over 4 weeks straight. Supplementation led to more strength, more muscle, and measurably reduced fat mass. Looking at that data honestly, it is hard not to get excited immediately. Strength up, muscle up, fat down, all from one supplement in 4 weeks. But this is where we have to slow down and look more carefully here. Here is what nobody talks about. Placebo comparisons require much deeper reading than this. So let us look at the study that made researchers actually question entirely. This study compared 1.5 grams of with whey protein against 1.5 grams of leucine, also combined with whey protein. The training protocol was serious, 12 weeks, 3 phases, structured periodization throughout completely. Phase 1 was 3 days per week, Solid foundational resistance training for everyone. Phase 2 pushed into overreaching. 5 days per week. Volume cranked way up. Phase 3 was a deload. Back to 3 days. Recovery built deliberately in. This was not a lazy study design. The training was genuinely well constructed here. And the result? No difference between HMB and Leucine across any measured outcome. No difference in strength. No difference in muscle. No difference in fat loss. Leucine did the same job as HMB, and Leucine costs almost nothing comparatively. Most people get this completely wrong. They think expensive always means more effective. So now the real question becomes, why does anyone still push HMB so hard? Because there are other studies out there showing results that look almost unbelievable. This next part is the most important, and also the most controversial section here. One paper actually asked the question, is HMB better than steroids outright? Not claiming it directly, but when you place the data side by side, 600 milligrams of testosterone weekly was showing weaker results than a few grams, and researchers started raising their hands, saying something here does not add up. Here is what nobody talks about. The creatine kinase levels inside these studies. Creatine kinase rises when muscle tissue is damaged. That is a standard biomarker. Beginners spike creatine kinase easily because their muscles are not adapted yet at all. A trained athlete needs to push extremely hard to get those same elevated levels. In the studies under question, trained athletes had creatine kinase levels matching complete beginners. That means these trained individuals were pushing at an incredibly high intensity throughout. And when you push harder, your results are naturally going to look better. So the results may be real, but the intensity variable was not controlled properly. Stay with me because this changes everything, especially when app enters the picture now. One of the papers under scrutiny combined HMB with 400 milligrams of ATP. ATP is your body's primary energy currency. More ATP means more output naturally. Add more energy to the system, and of course, performance numbers start climbing up. The paper did mention ATP supplementation, but critics felt it was not emphasized enough. The results were being attributed heavily to HMB, when ATP was also doing work. And that is a fair criticism. Transparency in research is not optional ever. Here is what nobody talks about. This does not mean HMB is useless entirely. It means the extreme claims need to be separated from the reasonable ones carefully. Over placebo, HMB does appear to offer a real and measurable benefit consistently. The controversy is not about whether it works. It is about how much exactly. Write this down, because here is the most practical takeaway from all of this. If Leucine does the same thing for less money, start with Leucine first always. Combine Leucine with your whey protein. Research shows it can multiply protein utilization significantly. Up to 4 times better bioavailability has been reported when Leucine is added separately. That is already a powerful stack, and it costs a fraction of HMB price. But here is the one reason I personally lean slightly toward HMB over Leucine. HMB does not appear to spike insulin as aggressively as Leucine does alone. For someone doing intermittent fasting, or following a lower carb eating protocol daily, an insulin spike during a fasting window is something you genuinely want to avoid. If HMB can deliver a similar downstream signal without the same insulin disruption, that is actually a meaningful advantage for a specific type of person and goal. Most people get this completely wrong. They think supplements are one size fits all. Context matters. Your diet structure matters. Your fasting protocol matters enormously here. This next part is the most important, because it wraps everything into one answer. HMB is safe. The data on that is actually quite consistent and reliable. HMB appears to work better than placebo. That also holds up across multiple studies. HMB is not some miracle compound beating anabolics. That narrative does not hold up. And HMB may not beat Leucine in a direct head-to-head comparison either. So, should you take it? Only if you understand exactly what you are buying. It is relatively expensive for what it offers when leucine is already available cheaply. But if insulin management is a priority for you, it deserves a closer look. Here is what nobody talks about. The supplement that sounds less exciting often wins. Leucine is boring. Sounds advanced. But boring and cheap often beats advanced expensive. The data does not lie, but the way data gets presented absolutely can mislead. And that is the most important skill you can build around any supplement topic. Read past the headline. Look at what was actually measured, and how carefully. Ask what else was being taken. Ask how hard subjects were actually training throughout. Ask if leucine alone would have done the same thing for almost no cost. Because at the end of the day, your results come from training and nutrition first. Supplements are the last 5%, not the first thing you should be investing in. But within that 5%, is one of the more honest options available, not overhyped once you strip away the extreme claims layered on top of it. Safe, modestly effective, and potentially useful if insulin sensitivity is part of your goal. That is the honest answer, and an honest answer is worth more than hype.